There it is. Hey guys, good afternoon. Gavin Syme here on the live show, and pop right in there, guys. And let's all hop in. I got a couple stories to tell you actually today. I'm going to tell you the story about my very first fist fight. Maybe that was my only fist fight, but I'm going to tell you that story. Tony, Mark, all you first comers in there. Shout out to our first comers. Seth, hello, Afreda, Team Explorers, Mr. Three Green, East Bay, Holy Guacamole, William, Abstract Echo, everybody. I see some familiars in there. Shout out to you guys, and glad to see you all in there. Mash that like and subscribe button. Subscribers have been going up lately. Hello, Mexico, and it is the Mexican presidential elections today, and a lot of other elections, and it is quite interesting. Something you can Google when you get off here. Shout out to all our new supporters and old supporters in there. And obviously, I don't vote in Mexico, but it is interesting to observe what's going on. And there's a lot of debate about the election this year and getting the USA out of Mexico's business, the drug war, all this kind of stuff. Very interesting things. So shout out to all my Mexican brothers. If you guys, if I'm a little tired, I'm sorry. That's one of the reasons I haven't streamed this week is I've been sick most of the week. I got some kind of a stomach bug or something. And it tends to debilitate me a little bit. I've been a little tired lately. And I think honestly, I mean, I just think there's been a lot of stress in the past year, and I think I have kind of some nerve damage. I've had some problems in my legs and stuff, and a little bit lately. I'm doing okay. Don't get me wrong. I actually there's a really good formula. there's my kids, follow Syme kids in there. And there's a really good formula called Relaxes that uses skull cap and some others, and it's very good for restoring the nerves. I need to find the materials I need for that down here and make some of that so that I can try and just get my little idiosyncrasies. I think God uses sickness to keep me humble and make sure I remember the suffering. And it's good to see. It's good to see you guys in there. So my first fist fight, and I want to tell you a little bit. I want to tell you a little bit about the darker side of Gavin Syme. And by that, I don't necessarily mean that I screwed up. I just mean, a lot of times we talk about a given topic, and today's topic, I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of me, of Gavin Syme, and what got me here. You know, when I had to have been, I don't know, I must have been between 9 and 11, and I rode my bike everywhere. Now, I was kind of a wimpy kid, and, but very fiery. I was always fiery, and I was always out doing things, and I rode my bike everywhere, and I would run around town, and there was this group of these 2 or 3 kids that were bullying me, and they would chase me. I remember them harassing me and chasing me on their bikes, and I remember running into stores to seek refuge and stuff because these kids would harass me, and whenever they would see me, they started harassing me. Now, you know, I talked to my parents about this, and it wasn't like my dad. My dad was always one to encourage us to be peacemakers, but my dad said, look, you have to be willing to stand up for yourself. I don't know if any of you guys remember that old Leave It to Beaver from the 50s where Beaver was being bullied and his dad taught him to stand up for himself. But it was a little like that is kind of how I remember it. And so these kids would bully me around town. And I remember one day that I had been thinking about this, and these kids were chasing me, and I went near to home, and I think my dad and mom were nearby, and they said, look, I mean, you got to stand up for yourself. You got to quit running. And I went, and this bully had followed me down the road, and I ran over there, and I punched him in the face. And we got in this fist fight. And it didn't last very long, and bear in mind, 10-year-old punches are not usually that much. We were actually both pretty scrawny kids. The only reason that this guy was bullying me is because he could, much like the thugs that we see in government today. And I remember how empowering that was, Not because of the punching. I didn't really hurt him. In fact, after that, we kind of had it out, and then I think my parents actually called the cops. Now, bear in mind, this was the 90s. Cops were not near as overtly violent, and the cops came, and as I recall, this cop was a guy that we knew, and he actually took this kid who had been bullying me for weeks, and he put him in the back of his car, and he took him down to the station and called his parents and let him go, right? Because everything hasn't always been about putting people into the system. And so I remember that was a big deal for me, right? Because the games that I played as a child generally involved me fighting bad guys, right? And I think this was normal for most of us kids, but usually they involved me fighting off the bully. And so when I finally stood up for myself and stood up to the bully, that was very empowering. And I remember some years later, gosh, it was either me, my bicycle, or my brother's bicycle that got stolen, and this kid took off with the bike, and he wasn't smart enough to leave very far. And I remember I went out and I chased him down, and I threw him off the bike, and I took him back to the house and handcuffed him. And in the end, we didn't end up pressing charges or anything like that, but I made it clear this better never happen again. And so it was never about, even my first fist fight, it really wasn't about hurting people. I think that's what's often forgotten. People like to say that Gavin or people like me or you guys that stand up are hateful or that we're violent, and we should never be seeking vengeance, okay? We should never be seeking vengeance. For me, though, as the years went on and I finally started seeing that bigger picture, realizing we weren't free, and standing up for that when I became an adult and started having kids. See, I never wanted to be an activist. I could never stand a bully, and it always bothered me, but I just wanted to be a businessman and a photographer and an artist. And then I started traveling the country with my family, and I saw how much non-freedom there was. So when I started standing up to that, I started getting backlash. And it's been from one phase to another, because first I would stand up against checkpoints or for gun rights or against the federal abuse of the Constitution. And at each phase of this, I would catch flack, right? Because then I stood up the police and the police worshipers. The police worshipers hated me for that. And then I stood up for the rights of the immigrant, because all men are created equal. And the idea that because you have papers, you have more rights and therefore have a right to be in the USA is completely contradictory to our laws, our Constitution, our history, our founding fathers, and the very concepts of freedom. It is pure fascism. And so the more I stood up for these things, the more hate there was. And the more bold I got for those things, the more hate there was. And eventually that led to a government trying to finally silence me, trying to finally bully me into submission, trying to say that I was harassing police, that I was committing crimes, and trying to put me in their concentration camps. And ultimately that led to me leaving the US, because it wasn't because of misdemeanor charges. This was so more than that. People that did what I did, people like Schaefer Cox, people like Jeff Winehouse, people like Leonard Peltier are sitting in prisons. People like Lavoie, who said no and who turned and ran from their tyranny and refused to comply, were murdered for it. And I saw what was coming. And I said, I'm not going to submit my family to this. My voice doesn't have power by being locked in a cage, and I'm not going to bow down to a fake court. But in doing that, I incurred even more hate. In doing that, I've been followed with calls of coward and traitor and anti-American, even though I'm actually still in America. And so as I came to a country like Mexico that, despite its problems, has far more tenacity, vastly more personal freedom, vastly more free economics, and I started standing up even more to the abuse of the immigrant, to the traitors in our government, to Blue ISIS. And so what followed me out was the constant jabbing stings of being called names by people who are pretend patriots, who back the government, who back our fake borders, who back building a new Berlin Wall to lock us into our country in the name of freedom. It's so completely irrational. But I think what hurts the most, I think the darker side of that, what causes me the most pain is when I look at my country. See, I actually love my country and I want the people in it to be free. And some might ask if I miss the USA. The USA doesn't exist anymore. I don't miss my hometown. I don't miss the corruption. I don't miss the constant oppression, the fear that the next time you get pulled over, you might be murdered by a cop. I don't miss that. It's not the cities or the states that no longer exist because they've been usurped by a federal government. It's not those things I miss. If I miss anything, in a week like this, when I'm sick, when I'm laid out, my thoughts are a little bit darker. And I tend to mull over in my mind because my mind is all I have when I'm not feeling well. And so I tend to mull over in my mind the choices and the consequences and whether they were right and what God thinks and what I think and all these things that have taken my life and turned it upside down ever since I was a boy. And what I find myself is torn. Mexico is the proper word to say it, but whatever you want to call it. Mexico is gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's diverse, the culture, the freedom, the climates, the oceans, the jungles, it's amazing. But there's this part of me that wishes I could have done something in the USA. See, I spent months traveling the USA. What started me on the journey of resisting the government was traveling with my family for my photography and my adventures and my videos that I make in that little RV. I'm actually working on selling that first little RV that we traveled the country in. And that's brought back a lot of memories because I explored the USA with my family. And it's hard to convey this, but what makes me sad is not that I'm not in the USA. What makes me sad is those highways and those byways, those trips with my families on lonely, sun-glistening forest roads and open meadows, and the babbling of brooks and the idea, the wilderness and the mountains, and the craggy peaks, and the blowing grass, and the concept of what the USA was supposed to be, that diverse melting pot that welcomed the beat down and the broken from all over the world to find something better. And I think what makes me really sad is that it doesn't exist there anymore. And so I have this image of what I saw exploring and photographing and adventuring and hiking into the mountains and climbing up to the waterfalls and all of these things. And I saw what the USA rather, could have been, what it was supposed to be, but it was soiled by nationalism, by patriots, by people who call human beings illegal because they have no concept of freedom, they have no respect for our Constitution, they have no respect for the rights of their neighbors. They think freedom is only them who are superior in their mind to other people being better than those next to them. And what really makes me sad is that that place can't have freedom, that it's drug war and it's border immigrations and it's abuse. What makes me sad is that I left behind a place that I loved, the land that I loved, because it's dead, because the people's hearts died, because the freedom died. That's what breaks my heart. And that's what I carry on my shoulders because I look back at that land and my people are still there. My friends are still sitting in prisons and I can't fix it. And it's not being fixed because the people won't resist. The people won't stop Blue ISIS. The people won't resist the government. The people won't stop believing the propaganda of borders and terrorists when their governments universally are the terrorists. The people won't respect the Constitution. They won't respect natural law. They won't love Jesus in their churches. They won't love their neighbor on their streets. The people won't stop pride. They won't stop hate. They won't stop vengeance. They won't stop illegal prisons and abuse. They won't stop celebrating their terrorism of others. And that's why there can't be any freedom right now in the USA, and there won't be in the foreseeable future. And so for me, I keep trying to speak out and tell people because I want some of you to escape. I want some of you to see it. I want some of you to know. I want you to resist, but when you resist, you will eventually have to walk away and escape, most likely, or be in a concentration camp yourself. You see, the reason the USA has no freedom is because of cowards who won't stand up, of people who pretend that courage is to stay and submit to tyrants. Guys, have you ever heard of someone who escaped Nazi Germany being called a coward? I didn't think so. See, the people who resist are the ones who resist. They're the ones who resist on the streets. They're the ones who push the bully back. They're the ones who, if necessary, say, I'm going to leave and find freedom because I'm a patriot and I want my people to be free. And so I'm going to go where that is. The mother and father of Jesus ran. Jesus ran. God's people ran. Jesus told his people to run. The founding fathers ran. The entire USA was predicated on the principle of running away from a treasonous, abusive, criminal, thuggish state and finding something better and defending that. That's what patriotism is. But in the USA, we have nationalists, we have flag wavers, we have people defending troops who wage illegal wars and abuse people all over the world, defending cops who murder our children and our brothers and our sisters on the street, and defending a government and politicians who do the same crimes against us and violate our rights over and over and over again. And I want you to know that when you stand up, they'll mock you, and when you finally have to walk away, they'll call you a coward, but they're the real cowards because all they can do is submit to tyranny. And all they can do to live with that is to call it patriotism and courage. And you can never let that define you. Does it weigh on me some days? Yeah, it does. Does it wear me out some days? Sure, but we press on. And so, has there been struggles in Mexico? Is it hard to have packed up everything, or what I could carry rather, in the dark of night and leave everything else behind? Thanks, Trail. Was it hard to do that? Was it hard to leave everything I know and go to a country where it's an effort to go to a restaurant and order food because I can't speak the language? Heck yeah. It's the adventure of a lifetime. And there's a lot of things that are hard to leave behind about a place that you're used to. But you know what? It's worth standing for freedom. It's worth resisting. It's worth speaking out against the people who hate the law, who hate those who stand for freedom because they don't have the courage to be free themselves, or they profit from the tyranny, like our police, like our politicians, like their friends. It's all right. It's all right to bear a little stress and a little burden for our neighbors and stand up for them, because that's what it's about. And I hope that you guys will do that. I hope you guys understand that while we do resist, I admire the resistance we're seeing of the auditors up in Texas and across the nation, and the people trying to resist, but you need to know where we're at. You need to know what it really means to be a patriot. You need to know that it's okay to walk away. You need to know you don't have to walk into the gas chamber. You need to know that courage is saying no to the bully. And sometimes that means you walk up and punch him in the nose. But when the bully is as big as an entire government and a nation of millions of ignorant people pretending that Christianity and justice and freedom is to abuse their fellow man, sometimes you've got to walk away and look for a place where you can carve out freedom for your family, where they don't have to be slaves. That's a little story about what put me here today. It's a little story about what put me in the nation of Mexico, where people spread endless propaganda like they're all poor, or there's no work, or it's the highest crime rate in the world, or all these blatant lies that are made up, when in fact, the USA imprisons more, abuses more, kills more, hospitalizes more, and molests more than any nation on the planet Earth. It comes from pretending that the terrorist nation that you submit to instead of defending freedom, that the nation you wave a flag for instead of defending what that flag represents. It comes down to being willing to admit that that happened because we weren't willing to say no. We weren't willing to resist, and we weren't willing to refuse the abuse of a bully. And so, yeah, that bully on the street, you don't let him chase you down the road. But sometimes when that bully gets big, when the whole people have become ignorant bullies, when the body of the people have ceased to be freedom fighters and become themselves fascists, like our founding fathers did, sometimes you have to say, you know what? I'm not going to submit to that bully. And I'm going to stand up for freedom and my neighbors by going somewhere else. And if you support the wall, if you support the deportation and the arrest of people because they crossed a line in the sand, you are the bully. You are the anti-American. You are the anti-patriot. You are the fascist. If you support the for-profit prisons and blue ISIS arresting people for their victimless crimes and filling the prisons through their fake courts and their trials and our politicians, if you're the person that says the veterans keep us free and protect our freedom by waging war and terrorizing the world, then you are the bully. You are the criminal. You are the patriot, and you need to repent, and you need to look in the mirror and see what you've become and learn your history and learn what it means to live free. Because living free starts with caring about whether your neighbor lives free. And that's just the way it is. All right, guys, I'm going to go. I'm doing okay. I'm just a little tired this week because I haven't been feeling good. And I'm glad you guys tuned in, share this, spread it. I know it was a little long, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the story of the real Gavin Syme. I hope you guys can think about that. Maybe even if you don't agree with me, just look at the history, look at where we came from, look at the concepts of life, liberty, and property. If you believe that all men were created equal, then you cannot possibly believe that you're better than someone else because of where you live or your papers or the flag that you wave. So you have to decide which one you believe. All right, guys, if you missed the story, you can go back to the beginning when I finish up here. And I appreciate the likes, the subscribes. Shout out to our supporters on our growing Patreon, patreon.com/Gavin Syme. Love your neighbor. Peace.